Hello and welcome to another video by Sadat Education. So we continue within our mathematics course within the number and algebra units, and we continue with our laws of indices. Before we continue, I'd like to just round up the existing laws of indices that we have discussed on the channel, and they are law number 1: when multiplying indices with the same base, we add the powers, and we have a specific video for that. Law number 2: when dividing indices with the same base, we subtract the powers. Again, we also have a video on that. When raising one power to another, we multiply them, and we can see that with a bracket. We also have a video on that. Any term to the power of 1 is just itself. Any term to the power of 0 is just 1. Again, we have videos on that on the channel. And any 1 to any power is still just 1. Now, moving forward, we are going to look at negative and fractional indices. Now, first of all, if we deal with negative indices, okay, and I'll highlight that there, to begin with, we need to remember certain key facts, okay? And that is this: negative powers lead to reciprocals. Negative powers lead to reciprocals. And I strongly encourage you to jot that down in your notes, because that would be an excellent revision tool. Negative powers lead to reciprocals. Now, what is a reciprocal? Well, if we take a fraction, okay, so say for example I take the fraction 4/7, then the reciprocal is merely the inverted fraction. So we invert the fraction 4/7. If we flip it over, we invert it, we get 7/4. This is my reciprocal. That's all there is to it. Let's take a look at another example. Say if we have 125/36. Well, if we invert that fraction, if we flip that fraction, it gives us a reciprocal of 36/125. Therefore, the reciprocal of 125/36 is in fact 36/125. Let's take a look at another example now. Say if we have the number 8. Now, the number 8, or any integer, can be written as itself over 1. So we can write 8 as a fraction. We can write it as 8/1. Now, if we invert, we flip that fraction, we get 1/8. Therefore, the reciprocal of 8 is 1/8. Let's take a look at another integer, another positive or negative whole number. Let's look at 17. Now, as we know, as we've discussed, 17 can be written as a fraction as 17/1. Therefore, if we invert the fraction, if we flip the fraction to get the reciprocal is in fact 1/17. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to go straight into a question and apply what we have understood so far in order to deepen our understanding. Calculate 8 to the power of -2. Well, the first thing we always do is this. First of all, pretend the negative power is not there. The negative is not there. So say, for example, we just had 8 squared. Now, we know 8 squared means 8 multiplied by 8, which is in fact 64. Okay? Now we know, we have just learned that negative leads to a reciprocal. A negative leads to a reciprocal. So first of all, we have dealt with the 8 to the power of 2, but we haven't dealt with the negative. So that's what we are going to do. When we're dealing with the negative, we take our 64, okay? So therefore, 8 to the power of -2. Therefore, 8 to the power of -2 is the reciprocal of 64. And as we know, 64 we can write as 64/1. So the reciprocal of 64 is in fact 1/64. So I'll just explain that again. So first of all, we ignored the negative. And we just evaluated the question as a positive power. So we dealt it with 8 squared equals 64. Then we went and dealt with the negative, and we said that the negative leads to a reciprocal. Okay, negative leads to reciprocal. So we took our integer and we inverted the fraction 64 over 1, we inverted to 1/64. okay, and that gave us our final answer. So we can double underline our answer and we can commit to that now. Let's go ahead and take a look at another example now. Calculate 3 to the power of negative 3. So what's our first step? Our first step is ignore the negative, okay? Evaluate the 3 cubed, okay, as it is. Now 3 cubed actually means 3 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 3, which is in fact 27, okay? And now we shall deal with our negative, and as we know, negative leads to reciprocal, so let's write that down. Negative powers lead to reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 27, well, as we know, we can write 27 as 27 over 1. So the reciprocal would be, in fact, 1 over 27. So therefore, 3 to the power of negative 3 would be 1 over 27. And we can double underline our answer there to commit to that. So why did we get 1 over 27? Well, first of all, we ignored the negative power. So we had 3 cubed, which was 27. And then we brought the negative power into play. And so we had to invert our fraction. We have to provide the reciprocal. And that gave us a final answer of 1 over 27. Let's take a look at our next example now. So now we have a fractional power. A fractional power. Now before we go into this question, there's some fractional powers which you must know. Okay? Now first things first. The power half, okay, the power half means square root, and I strongly encourage you to jot this down and have it in your notes. So the power half, let's make that look a bit neater, a bit clearer. The power half means square root. And I strongly encourage you to write that down. The power 1/3, the power 1/3 means cube root. The power 1/3 means cube root. And the power 1/4 or 1 over 4 means fourth root. The power 1 over 5, 1/5 means fifth root, etc., etc. Okay, so let's take a look at an example here. Okay, so say for example, if we were to say the square root of 49. Okay, now we know that the square root of 49, which number multiplied by itself gives you 49? Well, it is in fact 7. Okay, so another way we could demonstrate that or display that is by writing 49 to the power of a half, which is also 7. Therefore, the square root of 49 and 49 to the power of half are identical. Let's take a look at another example. Say, for example, if we say the cube root of 729. So which number do I have to multiply by itself? Okay, multiply by itself 3 times to give me 729. Well, that is in fact 9. Okay, so the cube root of 729 is 9. So another way we could write that is by simply writing 729 to the power of 1/3 also equals 9. Okay, so let's make that clear. Power half means square root and a power third means the cube root or the third root. It's very important that you memorize your square and cube numbers, and on the estimating roots video we have gone through our square and cube numbers on there for you, so you can check that out on the channel. Calculate 16 to the power of a quarter. So if we have 1/4, we're being asked for the fourth root. So what number do I have to multiply by itself 4 times to get 16? Okay, so what number do I have to multiply by itself 4 times to get 16? So let's take a look. So the number is in fact, and I want you to think about this, pause the video and think about it. Well, hopefully you pause the video and you discover that it was in fact 2. Okay, and let's demonstrate that for you now. Well, let's take a darker color so it's a bit clearer for you. 2 multiplied by 2 is 4, multiplied by 2 is 8, multiplied by another 2 is in fact 16. So if we multiply 2, let's use the highlighter, 2 by itself 4 times, we do get in fact 16. So 16 to the power of a quarter, the fourth root of 16 is in fact, and let's take our black pen to remain consistent, is 2. And we can double underline the answer there and commit to that. Let's take a look at another example now. 121 to the power of half. So remember, power half means square root. So 121 to the power of half is the same as the square root of 121. So which number do we have to multiply by itself twice to get 121? Well, it is in fact 11. Okay, because 11 times 11 is 121. So the square root of 121 is 11. And therefore, 121 to the power of a half is 11. Because remember, power half and square root mean exactly the same thing. Moving forward, calculate 16 to the power of 3/4. Calculate 16 to the power of 3/4. So with fractional powers like this, okay, we always split the fraction into a root and a power and then do them in that order. The root first and then the power, okay? So we're going to split the fraction. So our denominator, so let's write this down on the side, let's take a different color. Our denominator represents the root. The denominator represents the root. And the numerator, we'll take a different color for that. The numerator represents the power. So let's hope I've got enough space on my page here. Perfect. Numerator represents the power. And always, 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 we deal with the root first. So root comes first, and then second of all, we deal with the power. Okay, so let's write that down on the side. First and second. So first things first, 16 to the power of 3/4. Well, the denominator, which is 4, is in fact a root, so the 4th root. So first of all, what is the 4th root of 16? Okay, and then we are going to deal with our numerator, which is the power. So power 3, which means cube. Okay, so let's first of all deal with our bracket, the 4th root of 16. Which number do we multiply by itself 4 times to get 16? Well, that is in fact 2, because 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 is 16. And let me just quickly demonstrate that to you. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is in fact 16. Okay, so we've dealt with our bracket, so then we have 2 to the power of 3. Remember, we dealt with our denominator, which was the root 4 first. Okay, and that is how we came with the 2. Now we're going to deal with our numerator, which is the power. So 2 cubed, or 2 times 2 times 2, is in fact 8. And we can double underline our answer there. So if you go ahead and check it, well, we had a fractional power, which was 3/4. The numerator is the power. The denominator is the root. Always deal with the denominator, the root first. So we did the 4th root of 16 first. And then, so that gave us 2. And then we dealt with our numerator, which was the power. We did 2 cubed, 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2, which is in fact 8. Let's take a look at another example now. 16 to the power of negative 3/2. 16 to the power of negative 3/2. Now here we have a negative power, and we also have a fractional power. Okay? We have a negative power and we have a fractional power. So what we are going to do first of all is we are going to ignore our negative power, because we know that the negative means reciprocal, so we can deal with that right at the end. First, we're going to deal with the fractional power. Now with fractional powers, we have a numerator and a denominator. The numerator, in this case, which is 2, means root. So let's remind ourselves of that by writing that. So numerator represents the root, the denominator is 2, and the denominator represents the root. So I hope you were able to track that error I just made there in speech. Okay, the denominator means root, so let's write that down. Denominator represents the root, and the numerator, okay, so I'll take a different color, represents the power. The numerator, again, let's hope I have enough space. Yes, I do. Perfect. The numerator represents the power. Okay, and we always, always, always deal with the denominator first, the root first. So let's do that. So here we have root 2 or square root. So what is the square root of 16 first of all? And then we are going to raise that to the power of negative 3. So the square root of 16 raised to the power of negative 3. Well, the square root of 16, so which number multiplied by itself once gives you 16? Well, that is in fact 4. Okay, so we have 4 to the power of negative 3. So have we dealt with our denominator, our root? Well, yes, we have. How do we know? Because we have square rooted our number. Moving on, 4 to the power of negative 3. Now remember, we're going to ignore the denominator to begin with. We're going to ignore the negative symbol to begin with. So if we just do 4 cubed, okay, 4 cubed is in fact 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 4, which is 64, because 4 times 4 is 16, and then 16 times 4 is 64. Okay, and then we know that negative, okay, negative powers lead to reciprocals. So the reciprocal of 64, remember we can write 64 as a fraction, we can write it as 64 over 1. So the reciprocal would be in fact 1 over 64. And we can double underline our answer and commit to that there. Okay, so in this stage here, okay, 4 to the power of negative 3 is the same as 1 over 4 cubed, which is 1 over 64. Okay, let me just make that 3 smaller so we know it's a power. Okay, because why? Because negatives lead to reciprocals. Let's move forward. 125 to the power of negative 4/3. Again, we have a negative power, so we can deal with that right at the end by just turning our fraction upside down by inverting our fraction, leading to a reciprocal. So let's take a look at our fraction. So that's our negative power there, but let's take a look at our fractional power to begin with. Well, we have 4 over 3. 4 is our numerator, 3 is our denominator. Denominator means root and numerator means power, and we always deal with our root first. Okay, so let me just take a different colored pen. So the order is we deal with our denominator, which is our root first, and then we deal with our numerator, which is our power second. So let's deal with our denominator to begin with, our root. So the cube root of 125, okay, all to the power of negative 4. So let's deal with our cube root. So what is the cube root of 125? Well, which number do we multiply by itself 3 times to get 125? Okay, so I want you to think about that. Pause the video. So hopefully you'll have paused the video and we discover that that is in fact 5. Again, remember, it's very important for you to memorize the square numbers from 1 squared to 15 squared, as well as the cube numbers from 1 cubed to 10 cubed. That saves you a great deal of time. So the cube root of 125 is in fact 5. So let's write that in, 5 to the power of negative 4. So remember, when dealing now with the negative power, we can just, first of all, evaluate it as a positive power, and then we will just invert the fraction at the end. Well, 5 to the power of 4 means 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5. Okay, so 5 multiplied by 5 is 25. Multiplied by 5 is 125. Multiplied by another 5 gives us 625. So that's 5 to the power of 4 is 625. Now, 625, we know, can be written as a fraction as 625 over 1. But as we have a negative power, we need the reciprocal, okay? And the reciprocal of 625 is in fact 1 over 625. Because if we invert this fraction here, 625 of 1, if we flip the fraction, we get 1 over 625. And we can double underline the answer to confirm that that is our final answer. Okay, so if you're unsure, you can rewind the video, watch it again. So we've taken a look at examples from negative powers, fractional powers, as well as a mixture of the